I have a Jackson Algram. I don't see that on my list. Do we know who that is?
No.
Is that last name?
Yeah, Algram, Algrim.
Is it somebody's husband who they're getting on their computer?
I don't see this last name on my list.
Mm-mm. Hey, Natalie.
I'm gonna see who it is and then kick them out if anything bad happens really quickly.
Okay.
Hey, Becky, how are you?
I'll cover my eyes.
Maybe it's Kelly.
That's what I was thinking. Maybe it's somebody is getting on somebody else's computer to do it or something.
Where's Jennifer?
Oh yeah, that's
Hi all, it's Jacqueline.
hi
I-
Jacqueline.
Kid was signed into Zoom.
Oh,
Ah, we were wondering who that was.
Hey, Jennifer, how are you?
I'm great. How's everyone?
good.
I've been thinking about you.
Now we're interested about dairy.
A lot of milk dumping going on across the country.
Mhm.
We're trying, like, so I don't know if you guys know, but like, so one of the big things that my company does is trying to get resources funneled to get the milk to schools for school meal programs and to feeding banks. So those are the two that's number 1 and 2 priority. And there are lots of grants out there for school refrigeration equipment. So if the district needs school refrigeration equipment, let me know. Because we're raising, I think we've raised like $23 million through our Gen Youth program, which is also where we do our Field to Play 60 for school refrigeration.
Wow.
So
Okay.
all of these companies, like agribusiness companies like Cargill, want to give money to dairy farm. Like they say to dairy farmers, what can we do to help you? And we tell them, buy milk and buy refrigeration equipment.
Yeah, that is really a fascinating, little behind the scenes thing. Okay, I think we're ready to start. Everybody
Let's do it.
around? All right, so it is 6:03 on April 23rd. And we'll call the Citizens Advisory Executive Team meeting to order. I'm Becky McCabe, board member.
Jillian Barker, board member.
Why don't we go around let's see. I might be easier if I just read people's names, don't you think? Yeah. We have Pat Stacy with us, Garrett Seaman, Natalie Assell, Jacqueline Vasquez, Jennifer Block. We may have a few other people join us as it goes on. Dr. Pearson is here, Carol Smith is here, Chris Ratchford and Lynn Schwartz are our secretaries. So thank you all for coming tonight. Mr. Smith, my understanding is that there are no citizen comments that have been recorded today.
That is correct. No citizen comments.
All right, thank you. So we hope you all are well and that your families are well and everyone is doing what they need to do to stay healthy and as well as calm through this period of time. We appreciate you spending your time with us tonight. We thought it would be a good idea for us to meet as an exec team to talk about where we are and what we need to do for next steps. So we will get into that as our major part of the agenda. But we thought it would be great for Dr. Pearson to fill us in on a COVID-19 update. So Dr. Pearson, could you fill us in, please?
Sure. So I don't know how many of you have had a chance to follow the board meetings, but over the past couple of weeks, I've had the opportunity to kind of share with the board some of the things that are going on related to our response to COVID-19 in the district. There are kind of several tiers of response. I mean, one is, of course, emergency preparedness and response to the actual medical and health crisis portion of COVID-19 and what that means for our district and our community. One area is, of course, remote learning and trying to provide continuity of instruction for students across the district during this time when our physical buildings are closed. And then, of course, a big portion of the work that we're doing right now is also trying to provide additional resources to students and families, including things like our lunch programs and meal programs that we are currently providing. So I'm going to speak to just each one of those pieces just a little bit. From an emergency preparedness standpoint, we as a district participate in conversations on it started out being a daily basis, and now it's about 2 or 3 times a week basis with the Kane County Regional Office of Education, the Kane County Health Department, and other entities in the community that are responsible for the health response. Of course, early on, we were supporting getting PPE to different agencies that were providing direct help to people that were affected by COVID-19. And so we donated pretty much all of the masks and gloves and face shields and that kind of equipment that we had in the district, either from our autos program or from our nursing offices to the health department, and then they distributed it to a variety of agencies in the county that provided medical service. We also helped the St. Charles Police Department get some thermometers for taking temperature. We gave them the ones that we had, and Juanita Gravinsky, who's our health services coordinator, did a training for them on kind of what to do, what protocols to walk through if you think someone's been impacted, and then how you respond to that. So we were able to help the police department with that training. We've also completed a survey for the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and IEMA also, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, just about our facilities. And they wanted to know about things like our actual physical buildings, like did we have physical building space? Did we have kitchens that could be used to prepare food? Did we have buses that could be used for transportation? So we completed a survey with information. Do we have bus drivers that could drive if needed? So we completed a survey, and from time to time, they can access that information if they need to access those resources in our community. We haven't been asked to participate to date. However, I anticipate that when we do get to a point where they're trying to do vaccination clinics across the state, that we will be asked to provide space for some of that kind of work as well. So that's something that we stay in contact with them and try to be as responsive as we can with the resources that we have available for the community. I think by now you know that from a teaching and learning standpoint, every school district in the state is implementing a remote learning plan. And as of the end of last week, we're all out of school for the remainder of the school year, even up until the governor announcing today that the stay-at-home order is going to be extended until May the 30th. So this is a plan that when we first put it together, we were very fortunate because we really had the spring break week to work on the plan and kind of think about the different components and pieces. And our teachers association and actually several of our teachers who were really on break during that week really stepped up to help us work on putting that together, in addition to our learning and teaching department administrators. And that's of course posted on the website, and the information is out there available. And we are trying to provide as much continuity of instruction for students going forward for the remainder of the school year in a remote setting. And I've said this before, but we were really fortunate that the board has been for the last few years been working on kind of a plan to roll out kind of a one-to-one device initiative, or at least ensuring that every student in our buildings had access to technology. So when this occurred, we had what we needed to be able to provide that to students. And I would have said 3 or 4 years ago, we wouldn't have been in the same place because we didn't have those same kinds of resources available. So that was something that was appreciated and helped us as a district be able to roll this out. There are clearly things that people are facing it from a challenge perspective, but I really think I'm really proud of the work our teachers are doing. They've stepped up and are providing what they can. They're collaborating really in a lot of different ways to try to provide some consistency across courses and grade levels and curriculum. We have the remote learning planning days on Fridays, which give them an opportunity to walk through some professional development and professional learning. Any of you that are educators or any of you that have ever done presentations or tried to deliver something in an online format know that doing it in that platform is completely different from what happens in the classroom. And there's a tremendous amount of design work that has to go in, and you kind of have to, from a pedagogical standpoint, you have to almost be constructivist in the way that you put the materials together and the sequence online, so that as students walk through the experience, they have the learning. And so that kind of work is very, very time and labor intensive. And so our teachers are working really hard to try to do that. And I think they're learning a lot from each other as they start to unpack that kind of work. And we continue to get better at doing it. I think some of the feedback that we're hearing is that there are people that wish there was a lot more work, or that there was more face-to-face interaction with teachers. But we're really kind of following what's best practice for online learning and what's developmentally appropriate. And quite frankly, if you look at the state guidelines, at most grade levels, we're close to the maximum recommended time. So I really feel very comfortable with what we're doing right now. I think as we continue to do this for the next few weeks, we have a lot to learn. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about a survey that's going out. If it didn't go out today, it's going out maybe tomorrow, but we'll talk more about that in a minute, to parents and families about remote learning, and also about kind of social and emotional development. I think that that's going to provide us with some insight and information. I also think that as a district, we have to be thoughtful about what this looks like the next time we have the opportunity to implement some kind of remote or online learning, because I wish that I could say that there's going to be a magic button that is pushed over the summer, and that in the fall and August, everybody's going to go bounding back into classrooms in our district. And that very well may happen, but I actually think it's going to be we're going to have new expectations, and probably have to put some different support structures in place. So that's something that we're even beginning to plan for now as we think about closing out this year and starting next year. Then from a community standpoint, we've had tremendous response from community members about wanting to help, meet the needs of families in our community that are affected by the current stay-at-home order. So we've had everything from organizations and individuals wanting to donate gift cards. And so we have restaurant and meal cards that have been donated that are being mailed out to families that are identified by the schools and the social workers. So we're trying to help distribute to families that need those kinds of supports. We also, of course, are feeding students every day, breakfast and lunch. And it is available to anyone in the district. You don't have to have, normally a free lunch is provided through the National School Lunch Program, and that requires you to actually be qualified for free lunch. But during this time of the COVID pandemic, we are able to provide lunch to anyone that wants a lunch. And so we continue to encourage people to come by and pick up breakfast and lunch if that's something that they need or are interested in having. So we have seen an increase. I think on Friday, we distributed 500 meals, and on Monday it was about 700, almost 800 meals. So we continue to see the number of meals that are being distributed increase. And we hope to be able to actually provide meals in the summer as well. There has always been a summer program, but because of the COVID pandemic, we have the possibility of being included in an expanded program for the summer. So we'll be looking at that and getting information out, because I think many of the families that are affected, either because of loss of work or employment or a reduction in maybe hours at work, this is certainly something that they would benefit from. And we as a district are quite happy to to be able to provide that if it's something that people want. So anyway, that's something we're looking at for the summertime as well. So those are kind of the different components. I think right now, the next steps in the planning process are thinking about, some of the big events that happen at the end of the school year. Graduation is one that is, a culminating event that people look forward to. But there's also awards assemblies and different kinds of student recognition programs that the schools are beginning to plan for and think about how we can deliver that in a format that might be different than what we would typically do. In addition to that, we are talking about like summer school and summer camps and summer programs. And, for now, all of the in-person kinds of experiences in the summer have been canceled. And so we're looking at online summer school, which fortunately at the high school, we've had several courses that have been offered online in the past. So it's easy, that's a seamless transition for us. But there are some other classes that we typically offer in summer school that we're having to evaluate whether or not those would be available in an online format. And so we're working on that and hope to get information out to families about those offerings as soon as possible. And then I just kind of briefly mentioned the conversation is starting to pivot. At the state level, there are kind of three task force. There's a big task force, and they've broken off into three different representative groups, and they're looking at kind of big categories. So one is graduation requirements, which I think the governor is going to actually have an executive order on any day now. Another is what they're calling lost learning or learning loss, which they're trying to kind of quantify and figure out, what does the instructional gap look like? And then what are some recommendations and resources that are being recommended for school districts to access to maybe help with some of the transition back to school. And then the other group is basically a return to school group, and they're starting to kind of work through what some of the issues are that we need to be thoughtful about as we think about returning to school. And again, I don't think that it's going to be just everybody shows up on the first day of school and we unlock the doors. I honestly think that there's going to be some kind of expectation for smaller groups and some kind of transition back to school, particularly in the fall. So there is a state group that's working on that issue, and they will of course be providing us with some guidance as well. So those are kinds of the pieces that we're thinking about and working on right now. The board is having to kind of look at the budget. One of the things in our district that is we're fortunate in a couple of ways. One is the board has for several years now been really responsible from a fiscal standpoint, and because of that, we have for lack of a better term, a rainy day fund for when we need to have when we have a situation like this occur. Unfortunately, funding from the state has been unstable now for over a decade, and for those of you that have been here a while, you may have remembered around 2008, 2009, at the point of the last recession, there were school districts all across the state that would put up on their billboard like how much money the state owed them. You drive by a school district and they would say the state owes us $210 million because the state wasn't paying their categorical payments. And then when they did pay their categorical payments, they were very late. Sometimes they would come in the following fiscal year. And often it was, so they used to pay 4. There were some years where they only paid 1. And so there was quite a bit of time there where they were not consistent. Now, within the last few years, they have been paying their bills in a more consistent way, which has been helpful. But people remember when the state wasn't paying their bills. And as a district, we remember when the state wasn't paying their bills, and we are not as dependent as some communities are on the state for funding. They represent a very small percentage of our overall budget, but we've operated under those parameters before and have planned for that. So anyway, I think those are kinds of the big pieces that are up in the air as we kind of think about our response right now as a district, and that's what we're working on.
Thank you. Kelly Taylor has joined us. She looks like she's not in St. Charles tonight, but she's Kind of nice.
I am. I just put my favorite place to be in the background because I'm on so many Zoom calls and I'm sporting St. Charles tonight. So sorry I was late, everybody.
Thanks. We're glad you're here. So Dr. Pearson, one of the things that I'm hearing, and I don't know if you have any details to tell us, is how will kids pick up their things? I assume you guys have started to discuss that. Is there anything you can tell us?
Yeah, we are working on a plan to do that right now, and more than likely it's going to be a drive-by pickup kind of scenario. So within the next week or so, we hope to have information out to families about what that looks like. But we're planning on kind of helping pack up all of the things, especially the elementary level for students, and then you'll come by and pick up your bag of materials in a drive-through kind of scenario. So one of the things that kind of informed that plan is kind of the extension of the stay-at-home order through the end of May. And so we certainly are not going to be able to open the building to large groups of people to come in. And we think this is probably going to be the best way to approach it. So teachers will come back first and have some time to pack up their things, but then also to help us pack up student materials, and we'll put them in big bags and label them with student names, and then you'll come by and pick up your materials.
Okay. Any quick questions that people have?
Yeah.
Jennifer?
It's just in line with some of the work we were doing the last time we met. How badly is this going to impact your timeline for starting the new curriculum with, I can't think of the technical name for it, but that option that we were working on as a group.
The Empower timeline?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the board actually is going to be discussing that at their May board meeting. Really, the work is done for Empower, and the planning work is done for Empower. The curriculum's done, and they looked at it at Learning and Teaching on last Monday night. We have in the budget the staffing for that, and really it's part of the contract commitment that we have with the association. So we negotiated the extended day as well as the Empower scenario as part of our current teacher contract, which next year we're in year 2 of a 3-year contract. So we are prepared and we have budgeted to move forward with that plan. And so unless there's any concerns or issues when the board has a discussion at the May meeting, from our perspective, we're ready to go.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Jack. Oh, I'm sorry. Jacqueline?
Sure. And I pre-apologize if you hear my 2 little guys in the background. They tend to run around, and this is the new norm, right? So I know that you were talking about considerations for the fall. I know I'm also at a state level talking about, if COVID-19 does come back through and implications for what might be rolling out for the school districts. But I also know part of the conversations I've been a part of is knowing that this pandemic will have a generational effect on our children, our families, what's going to be a part of our communities. We're standing in a portal right now between what used to be and possibilities for what need to change moving forward. Not being able to drag what worked in the past into the future. I know that I'm hearing about Empower. Well, I think that it would be really, I'd be interested to hear if there will be conversations really with the COVID-19 lens on how things will have to change to move forward. I know that there has been plans and it will move forward, but in case, will there be not just Empower, but across the community? Are there conversations around in light of what's just happened and the inequities that have been hyper illuminated due to what's happened, how we're going to adjust everything moving forward? So is that just part of all the different conversations, or is it still like we're just going to continue to move forward and we'll address those as those come?
Well, no, I think you've captured something that's really important. And what I'm trying to do is to ensure that any communication that I bring to the table is fact-based and that we have a plan moving forward. But at the same time, there's a lot of unanswered questions and things that are being unpacked. And I was on a call this afternoon with several other large district superintendents. And we spent most of our call talking about how school might look different in the fall. you know, and depending on what the expectations are, like, are we going to have a limit on the number of people that we can have in a building at a time? You know, does that, I mean, how are we going to serve lunch? Right now, we run 1,000 kids through the cafeteria in about an hour. Is that even going to be possible? So, I mean, there are so many pieces that are in motion right now. Here's what I know. I know we have really great people in our district, and we're going to figure out a plan, whatever those parameters are. And, you know, as I said in my message initially, you know, student and staff safety is our first priority. And we're going to approach things first from that lens. You know, what do we need to put in place to ensure that students and staff members are safe? And then how do we ensure that they have access to high quality learning experiences in our district? And so I think you're exactly right. I think that, you know, we may be at such a pivot that school may be different from now on. For people, that there may be things that change and how that looks and how it's organized. And to be quite frank with you, we've needed to change some things about how school is done for probably 25 or 30 years now. So unfortunately, this pandemic has occurred, but at the same time, I think there are going to be some, for lack of a better term, silver lining kinds of things that come out of this scenario, where maybe we find some systems and structures for schools that are better. I believe that we have had a significant acceleration in the comfort and ability of our staff and students to use technology to support learning over the past few weeks. We're not doing everything perfectly yet. We're learning a lot, but boy, we had to, right? And so sometimes when you're thrown into a situation like that and you have to figure it out and learn, it sometimes accelerates what could have been a multi-year process in trying to get to the same place at the end. So I think there's a lot that has to still be worked out. I think we are just at the very beginning of a long process. You know, we keep talking about the fact that this is a marathon and not a race. And so we are going to have to pace ourselves as we work through each of these issues. But I also believe that we have the support and the resources and the community that we're going to be able to figure it out. So that's where we are. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. And I also wanted to just say, you know, I appreciate being a former educator and administrator, the Herculean effort that has had to come into place to support our community, because we know our community is only as healthy as our least healthiest community members. So I think it's been pretty great to see how fast and how supportive it's been. So I thank you for that.
Anyone else have any questions? All right, seeing none. And we're going to move into our part of the agenda for the discussion. And looking at where we are now, we know now that we will not be having any meetings in May, which is what we were suspecting we would have to consider, or at least make that decision. And so we really wanted to tap into your thinking as to what can we do now with this, you know, unique group of folks. How could we use what their information, their thinking, the feedback that they might be able to give us, or their connections as we come to the end of school. So we just wanted to kind of open it up to you all to see what your thinking might be. We have talked about a virtual meeting with 30 people, and we just don't think it'll be very productive. But maybe in more small group kinds of things could occur. So, Mrs. Barker, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think I just think we need to kind of start throwing ideas out about how we can continue to have this group. You know, it was just a short time that we got to meet with the whole group. And so trying to figure out, and maybe some ideas about, you know, what kind of things would the district like to hear from that group. And that might be a helpful too as well.
So we'll just open it up and, you know, and we're a small enough group, we may not have to raise our hands, but just be cognizant of your mic and, you know, I think we've all been on 1,000 Zoom meetings in the last 2 weeks.
You know, I just want to throw out there, yesterday I had to hold a conference via Zoom, which I thought was going to be a disaster because we had 500 people at the conference. And I'm shocked that they all stayed on. We kept it to like 2.5 hours versus it's usually a 2-day event. And the raise your hand and chat features worked really well. And so depending on what type of discussion and feedback is going to be useful for the board and this group, I don't want to discount if it's done in that function, you know, in the function where you raise your hand, where you can ask questions, it could be productive depending on what the board would like to hear. I also think it would bode very well with that committee. I mean, I was pleased when you guys were planning on holding tonight, you know, because it did give me I mean, we didn't get a chance to say, but absolutely grateful as a parent for all the information that we've been getting from the district, from our teachers, from the principal. It's just been, I would have to say, the right amount of help. I absolutely hate e-learning because I stink at it really bad, but I'm doing it and I'm finding my way but with encouragement, like really with positive encouragement from the teachers and the principals, and even help, you know, our principal offered social worker help if we needed it, you know, as parents. So, you know, it might be good to get a pulse and to use the CAC, you know, as a pulse for how other, you know, how is the community coping with it? Are there things that are really great? I certainly was just interested to hear that school meals have gone up. I mean, that's something that I plan to share with my company, that the need for meals is going up. Let's not take the foot off the gas, right? We need to keep making sure that food's available for those in need. And so, you know, the group could be used also as a reminder, these resources aren't going to go away. You know, it's also probably good that they hear that it's not just, you know, like it was very good for me to hear that it's not just going to be probably business as usual in the fall. Like there may be other things to consider regarding childcare, regarding, you know, before and after school clubs, you know, like there's this big part of everyone that wants everything just to go back to normal, and not everyone certainly is thinking yet that normal is going to look different. So having that discussion here might be very helpful for parents, in depending on the feedback you're looking for, is the important piece.
I would agree that I know that the district has moved away from Zoom, but I've also been able to utilize breakout rooms, which I'm sure other Google Meets, Hangouts, I'm sure they all have similar features, but the breakout rooms have been really great for smaller conversations between like 5 or 6 people. The larger share outs would be more along that chat feature. So I agree. I think that there's ways that we could conduct some sort of a convening for all of us. I think that in light of the change of education and our community, there's so many different things that would be helpful to be able to convene this group, to be able to gather input and ideas. And I think experiences are really important to hear. You know, just like hearing Jennifer's experience there and saying, you know, the resources, I think for some resources it was right on target. Sometimes it's overwhelming because we're all dealing with stress. And sometimes it was, you know, I can't navigate that. I can't even begin to even think about that yet. So I think that it would be interesting to hear the experiences, if anything, to be able to share that across other departments of how different people are navigating what's coming at them, or what they're hearing from other people in the community. And And it's not just that in regards to resources, but I think it would also be helpful to kind of maybe as we're rolling, as Empower is being rolled out, and if there is, you know, this movement into the new age of learning, how that's also like a real world pulse check on how people are faring with it as we're going along. So that might be very interesting as well. Coming out of this and going into it, knowing the life cycle of the pandemic, going from emergency response and high stress to triaging to finding a new normal, and how this is all faring, you know, stayed home, one parent that's able to stay and be with their kids, but also is full-time working, emergency responders, emergency childcare, what's happening, how people are faring, and then also thinking about, you know, coming out of this, in the light of this, helping people to be able to sort through what just happened, because social emotional affects our families, which then in turn affect our kids. So how can we help our family units or our caregiver units?
I'll jump in there. I just want to echo, I would say definitely don't let the technology limit us from kind of convening. And I would argue that it actually puts us in a more real-time opportunity here to react and think about discussions that the board is having. And so I would start by saying that from a Zoom or a virtual meeting standpoint, we can probably hold these even more regularly and not be the full kind of length of the normal meetings time. And whether that's just with the executive or with the full group, I think that we can, as Jennifer kind of exampled there, I think we can do this regardless of size, and I've experienced it that way. The second piece is, I think in the near term, and I actually thought, Jacqueline, I thought you were going here with this, but I think in the near term, everything should be in the lens of how this impacts virtual learning. Dr. Pearson already touched on this. The fall is going to look different. So while the board is thinking about Empower and the impact on Empower, my first question as a city board member is, what have they thought about in delivering this virtually? How does that impact kind of the hands-on approach? What elements are there? Where could we potentially shift, pivot, change kind of the approach there? And then we always have to kind of include in that virtual element, what's the social emotional impact on the quality of that instruction? What's the impact on our students that don't have the resources? Yes, we've provided them a Chromebook, et cetera, or the resources at home. Are they functioning well because they don't have the parental support? All of those things have to be considered. And so I think any issue that the board is reviewing now, the CAC can contribute to that conversation in the near term. And I really think our focus should be on the impact of virtual learning and bring a voice from parents and community members that say, this is how the virtual learning is impacting my community, us, and be able to kind of share that. And I think we start with Empower.
Well, and I guess this is Natalie, and I guess what I heard was that there's a survey going out. And when we initially talked, part of it was the board was charging us to review data. So maybe that's something that if you choose to have us provide input, we can do it through the lens of whatever it was, the survey that was sent out. Because if I think back to what our targets were for April and May, it was going over the strategic plan and providing organizational clarity and an understanding of that. So that was supposed to be today. And then we were supposed to do facilities planning in May, and that had gotten pushed back. So I'm going to assume that those topics are going to move to the fall. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure, and maybe this is a point of clarification for me, I'm not sure how much influence the Board of Education, who we're kind of here to serve and inform, has on the specific remote learning plan implementation. So that would be a question I guess I would have for,
Yeah, so I can comment just about a couple things. So one of the things I would say is that, yeah, we went from a point of kind of crisis response with remote learning. Like we have to have people have devices and something online in about a 48-hour period, to now where we are implementing and having weekly planning sessions to try to improve that, what we're delivering in that format, which kind of brings us to the point of the survey, right? So we're the survey that we're putting out is actually, it started as a social and emotional learning survey. We have been partnering with NIU this year to look at social and emotional learning in our schools, particularly with our middle school students. And so they have a data set that they have used historically, and we have data from the fall about social and emotional learning with our students. And so as we thought about kind of putting this survey out this time, we of course want to capture that social and emotional learning piece, but that's going to be influenced by what kids are experiencing with remote learning and at home right now. So that's going to be a new lens that we get to apply to that data. Then in addition to that, we're adding remote learning questions, things that we want to know about remote learning. Everything from like, what kind of access do you have at home? What is your broadband? What kind of, how much, how many devices do you have? Different kinds of things that we're trying to capture. Those are the hardware questions, but there's other, questions about their remote learning experience that we can then look at across the district, because I think what we are going to move into is some kind of plan that gives us flexibility to provide learning in a blended virtual remote process going forward. And knowing kind of knowing the context, what people's experiences have been, and kind of what some of the challenges and issues are, I think will help with that. So to say all of that, I feel like that we're going to have some data from this survey that would inform some of the topics that you all just mentioned. And maybe we start with looking at what those kind of results are, or what seems to be kind of the top topics or issues. And then as a group, maybe we could begin to unpack some solutions or some recommendations going forward. I certainly think it would be a good jumping off point, and maybe we could break up into some smaller groups to have conversations about different components that are identified through that process and use it as a feedback loop.
Jason, I like that idea. And I think that would be a valuable use of the CAC's time to support the district, as well as to inform the board.
I do like that it would be couched in data that we've asked people for input on, and those questions I'm sure have been very carefully crafted in different domain areas. So I like that versus an open-ended, broad conversation. Certainly we can still elicit pieces of that, but the empirical data will help us focus a little bit more, I think, and things that will ultimately, like Dr. Pearson is saying, will be long-term helpful to using the silver lining of all of this to change what we do.
I also think what we have to remember is that this CAC is unique because it isn't just parents. And so I don't know if there's a way to, if the survey would make sense in any way to send to our CAC members who aren't parents, or Pat says yes, but maybe we could get another voice as well.
But so two things. You read my mind, Becky, because I'm thinking, okay, I look at the website, and Jason, I listened to your video that was on there, and I've listened to the board meetings, and so I have a little bit of knowledge about what's going on. But I ask my neighbors from afar, so what are your kids doing? What do these things look like at this level and this level and this level? Because I have no clue. So that survey should answer, at least give me an idea, I would think, all of us, about some of those things. The other thing I'm hearing in this meeting is people keep talking about empower. Yet we must certainly have other classes at the middle school and high school level that are, I would venture to guess, struggling to figure out how to do that particular content in a digital format. And so those kinds of things, those classes are going to have to be looked at as well, not just our new empower piece.
And I would say that from an instructional standpoint, because Empower was just designed and the way the modules are designed, they've designed them in a way that they can be delivered in a virtual way. And honestly, the people that have been involved in that curriculum design are our most tech savvy staff members. So from my perspective, that's the least of, back to your point, the least of my concerns as far as like, how does what we do on a day-to-day basis in the classroom translate to a digital, virtual, remote, blended format. I think there are many other areas that we might want to tackle. And I think, quite frankly, we're going to see from the survey data maybe some things identified that people are either struggling with accessing or not able to understand. And I think ultimately some things are going to kind of rise to the top of the list that would help us prioritize kind of what our next steps would be.
My question.
I agree, Pat, in discussing that there's so much more to think about, but I think I'm also really interested in hearing about students with special needs services, thinking about language supports and all of these additional components for differentiation for our students that, you know, we're not there. I don't think anybody's there yet. It's just been a matter of delivering something to kids. So I think in hearing experiences and kind of sorting through what's happening, it could also be very helpful and just overall from the different perspectives.
Kelly, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I concur with that. You know, I teach at Harper, and I don't want to forget about the teachers that are having to put all this together. It's taken me probably 6 hours a day to do 2 hours of curriculum. And it's, you know, the students used to turn in a sheet of paper on the front table for 10 points. I would scan it, grade it, mark it up, hand it back to them. It was a 10-minute, you know, thing for maybe a half hour for 20 kids. Now it's about 6 minutes to 8 minutes per person just to upload it, download it, grade it, put the comments on the side, put it back up there, and then have some kind of feedback. So I am concerned a lot about A, the teachers, B, the resources that are going out there. I teach a VOTEC program, which is printing, and I'm worried about those in the high school as well. Some of those kids that are not traditional. And what Jackie said, at our school, we have ADS, which is Access and Disability Services. How are they going to be folded into this mix? And not only that, but what are the resources and or dollars that are going to be allocated to the budget that are going to come from somewhere? And I don't know, I'm not at anybody's level except for my own, to even have an idea if there's grants and all that coming down the pipes. But I know a lot of companies out there are offering their services for free for X amount of time, and maybe putting in ideas into their brains and reaching out to businesses like Pat had mentioned, you know, just getting non-parents involved as well in some of these survey questions with what can they contribute, or maybe a second survey or something. But I have a lot of frustration in my household right now. My kids are excelling. They are loving every second of it. They are on the honor roll and high honor roll. And I think they're made for this kind of learning. But my bandwidth is not, my husband is not, and I am not. So they don't laugh at my jokes. I don't get it. I can't see the face-to-face. It's really hard. But I think our teachers are doing really, really, really well. And given the amount of time they've had, I just would like to see, you know, who's doing what, how, and how is it working for them, because there's so many different ways of learning and teaching and all that. But my concern is, are the teachers going to be given more time like we do the Fridays now? Is that going to continue if this happens? And then the resources that are going to be given for that. That's it.
One, just from my personal experience with my two grandkids, the 7th grader, he loves it. He's done in 2 hours, and the rest of the day is his, and he's project oriented. 4th grader, it's not quite the same. She's missing her friends. She's very sad that school's not going on. And at that age level, not everybody has access to the same kind of social media. So I think, you know, I think that we're going to see families have really experienced many different kinds of reactions, even just between the different kids in their home. And I think our teachers have done a remarkable job to be able to support the different learners we have. But it is part of the way we have to look at what we do when we go forward too. So
Yeah, and I work with several high schools with dual credit and honors or AP, and everybody's concerned about that. But with dual credit, we are changing the way we're offering some of the dual credit stuff with the local high schools. In that, for example, Elk Grove, I know this isn't St. Charles, but they give everybody iPads, so they don't even have Chromebooks. And they're teaching Photoshop and other courses. Well, it's a completely looking different application on the iPad than it is on the laptop that the college uses. So even just adapting to how they're learning and what devices do they have? Are they using their Chromebooks, or they have to use their mom and dad's laptop, or do they have to use an iPhone for certain parts? You know, I know all of our kids are so fortunate in that we have the Chromebooks, but my daughter was like, do I have to turn that in? How is that going to work? You know, and my other daughter in high school wanted to know how she was going to get her gym clothes out of her PE locker. And I'm like, oh boy, let's just throw those away. So there's a lot of other things that we're all concerned about. I think having a CAC meeting and just talking about some of these things might be beneficial to us as a whole.
So,
oh,
sorry, Becky.
yeah, no, go ahead, Jen.
So what I'm hearing it might be a good idea is that there be some learning to begin with for a CAC meeting about maybe a walkthrough remote learning in St. Charles. What does it look like? What's happening behind the scenes? And before we even begin to talk about the data unpacked solutions or experiences, because not everybody's going to know, right? Not everyone has a kid in their home, or not everybody's having the same experiences with the different kids in their home. So maybe a walkthrough at the different levels. Would that, Dr. Pearson, would that be possible to put something together like that?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I just wrote that down, and we could just do an overview, 15-20-minute overview, and then maybe share the data from the survey and then have a discussion. Would be great.
And I would say in that opening, I definitely would highlight the resources available, to make sure that people know that there are resources. And I'm talking about beyond just the classroom.
Dr. Pearson, do we have information about kids that we know are falling through the cracks, kids who aren't, is everybody signing in? Or do we have contact with all of our kids?
Yeah, so we have staff members at all of our schools who their major part of their day is connecting with people that are not engaged or are not connected. So we do at the elementary level, we have a small percentage of families that we have not been able to reach or be in contact with. We actually think that there's been some mobility that has occurred for some families because of job loss and other factors where maybe they've moved to live with grandma, grandpa, or someone else. And so, we've been working on trying to figure out how to help those families. But for the most part, we are trying to be in touch with every kid. I am not under any grand illusion that people are, that every kid is fully engaged and participating every day in the learning that's happening. I think we're seeing somewhere around 80 to 85% of our students doing that on a daily basis. And so, it's taking time for some social workers and counselors and deans to kind of reach out to some other kids that are not engaging. But that, I don't know, is that different from in-person learning either. We have a group that, they skip class. They have other things to do with their day other than go to class. So we always have had to find ways to engage a certain percentage of the population. I think for us, the question is, why are they not participating? Is it a technology problem? Is there something going on at home? Are they having to work? We're trying to understand what the factors are that are impacting their ability to participate, because quite frankly, for some of them, it's a different set of factors than what has been happening before. I know at the high school, we have a couple of kids that they have to work and they're working because they're supporting their family.
And I think that as a district, as seeing many districts across the state and nation, like being able to identify the needs, immediate needs, and how to support families is part of what districts should be doing, but also the understanding that, you know, this is a curriculum of care right now. We're in unprecedented times during a pandemic. There's a crisis happening. Our own state, other states don't really know what's to come or really how we're working through this. As you had said that, you know, we know that there are task forces being put together to reevaluate what this looks like or what the fallout from this, and you know, how, if children are falling through the cracks, we won't know what that gap's going to look like for a while, but we know that this is going to be widening this opportunity and academic achievement gap. And that's very scary to think about, but knowing that our district, you know, there's so many great things that are happening and that there are proactive people that are out there trying to make the best of that. But even if children are logging in, even from my own personal experience, I recognize my privilege of being able to have my husband and I both still having our work, and that we have food in our home, a warm house, and that we're able to be outside in fresh air as often as we need to be. But that being said, it's very stressful that my husband's an essential worker and I have a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old, a pre-K curriculum and a kindergarten curriculum. And I have a degree in educating early childhood, and it's still a lot. So even just knowing that the timing, that I appreciate how much time my kindergarten teachers and my pre-K teachers putting in to produce these wonderful things, and knowing that we have to check in, but there's only so much we can do in a day, and even that catch-up day. And even to think about having to try and do it on the weekends, I'm like, you know what? We have to take our time as it comes to just connect and de-stress and just try and laugh together, because it's too overwhelming for some of the other things. And if that's my experience, I'm thinking of others that just don't have the food or don't have, I mean, to think about where the next meal is coming from, the last thing that they're thinking about is, let me get through all this homework, but they are checking in. So I think that in normal times, it may be hard, but even more so, it's going to be hard to see what that effect will be.
Looking at the calendar, we have a May 14th CAC on the calendar already. Dr. Pearson and Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Barker, you see that the breakout room, I assume, can work easily with what we have with the Zoom that we are using through the district. You think we can do that? Do you have enough time to help us put this together? Will the survey date, I'm a little confused about the survey data coming back. I'm not sure you'll have it ready, done. Will you, Mrs. Smith?
I don't know. The survey is probably going to go out, if not tomorrow, definitely on Monday. We were getting doing the final translations today because it's being sent out in both English and Spanish. So our elementary survey is ready. That's going to be the 4th and 5th grade students. And then the 6th through 12 students will be getting a different survey, and parents will be getting an even different, a third survey.
So all parents will get something.
Yes.
But
yes.
then we're also asking the kids. Okay.
Yes. 4th through 12th graders will be completing it. And I don't know what the date is by which we are supposed to have the information back. Maybe Dr. Pearson knows more about that.
Yeah, I just sent a message to Mr. Shazar to see if he knows what the timeline is. I would think that's what, 3 weeks from now? We have next week, the following week, and then it's the following week. I would think we should be able to get a data set back within 3 weeks.
Okay.
So we'll try for it. And if for some reason the answer is no, we can't, then we'll have to figure something else out. But for sure, we can have the remote learning presentation and we can have a conversation, and it would be really nice to have the data to inform that conversation.
What about the surveys that were sent out? I got a survey from the 2 schools my kids attend on how are we doing for e-learning. What about some of the data from that to support this additional social emotional survey? Did that go out to all the schools?
I don't know the answer to that. The early childhood one? Is that the one you're talking about?
I think, well, I mean, one was early childhood, but it came out from Pearson Creek. and one came out to Wasco. Garrett, did you get that at Wasco too? The survey on e-learning? So I think it was for all grades.
When did you get that?
I think it was maybe a week and a half ago.
Okay.
Let
The
me
one
look it
that we're
up.
talking about is going district-wide, and that's different.
Mm-hmm.
So it could just be that Pearson and Wasco sent out something, you know, for their own schools, but there is a portion of it. It's not only the social emotional portion that you're going to be getting and the students are going to be getting with this most recent survey, but it is also a check-in. How are you doing? Are you having enough work? Are you having too much work? Do you have internet connection at home? Do you have somebody to help you at
Right.
home? And all those kinds of questions. So it's both.
Right. I understand that. I was just wondering if this other survey was a district-wide, because they were very similar. So I assumed that they went out to the additional schools as well. I would wonder if that's that data
That was
could
not
be supported. It wasn't
that was
though?
not the no.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did get one as well for Belgraham, and I'm just reading it, you know, so there's the one, we have the reaching out survey, which is more of, I think, about the social workers that were available and whether you needed that type of support as a parent. And this one is very much about the one, the email that came out is about the partnership with Northern Illinois University. And it's not the survey itself, it's kind of letting you know it's coming.
Right, and that's the one that I'm talking about, is the one with Northern.
Yeah, I will say, the schools my kids attend, we did not receive a survey. So that might have been something shared with, you know, principals who chat. And so that's why you saw that coming out from those 3 buildings.
Okay, so we would be good to plan for the CAC on May 14th. We'll focus on the remote learning. I would suspect we'll have more news to share on what's happening. I think the task force, I think it's what some people don't realize, not necessarily this group, but how much the state is involved in what happens locally.
Mm-hmm.
So that may be part of what has to also be discussed, that if they're doing graduation requirements at the state level, you know, that will have an impact on what happens here. And if they have guidelines for returning to school, that's going to have an impact on the decisions that the district makes as well. So I assume that they're working as fast as anybody can to get that together. Is that fair to say, Dr. Pearson?
Yes. Yeah. It's difficult to make plans knowing that there are some things that we're just going to be told these are the things that you have to do. So until we know what's really flexible and what's not, you know, it's good to be thinking in that direction. And that's why, you know, the conversations that I have with some of the other superintendents and other districts, by the time we put all of the information that we have together, we come up with like one good set of information. So it's nice to have that collaboration and to be able to share and kind of what we're hearing and what we're thinking about doing.
I know one of the things that I'm thinking about as an educator, ex-retired educator and board member, is how assessment's going to be used in the future. I'm really excited about what assessment can look like, because for once it'll be about learning instead of about, you know, hitting targets. It'll be about what has to happen with, how do I know where my students are? How do I know what to do with that information? So at some point, I think that's, at least as a board member, I'm looking forward to how you're looking at what are we going to do in the fall when we have to figure out where all kids are, because that's not going to be our typical way of doing things. And without state testing and without local assessments, it'll be a different thing. I'm not suggesting to do that at this next CAC meeting, but I think it's a piece that would be good for us to have our families and community know how we're, I might be jumping the gun because it's down the road to decide, but it'll be a piece of the work.
I'm a big fan of managing expectations, and anything that we can do without scaring the horses unnecessarily, but to let people know, you know, things will, this will impact us forever. Things might look differently. They might look differently at your workplace. They might look differently at school, you know, different at school. They might look different when you're running your errands. So anything we can do to manage expectations of it, because I'm one of those completely delusional parents that keep telling myself, 5 more weeks. I'll be just 5 more weeks and I'll be done with this e-learning, and then I can give it back to those people who do it best, you know. And so, you know, it's even good for me to hear, you know, parents may have to be more engaged.
Well, and we have to remember it's 5 more weeks for a lot of people, but you know, the district runs ESY too, so, and summer school. That's extended school year for students with IEPs. So it keeps going after that.
Yeah, and at Harper, we already canceled all face-to-face classes for summer. So we are only offering online courses for the summer. So I anticipate a lot less students taking classes, whereas in our situation with the district, we have to make it happen if it continues. I am one of those families that's been deeply affected by this coronavirus, in that my husband lost his job. We are one of those families that my kids are suffering because they don't know how to handle a lot of things that are happening right now, but they're excelling at school, and that's their place. That's their place to go. So we're taking it day by day and doing the virtual thing. So
I'm sorry, Kelly.
He's looking for jobs, but after 20 years, it was a real shock. So that's where we're in that situation. And I know there's many other high school students that can work and their parents can't. So they're focusing on that. And I know, Dr. Pearson, you had mentioned that as part of we are looking at those students as well. So there's lots of reasons why they are excelling or aren't excelling, but I'm anxious to see this data as well and how our community is going to fare. And I hope that we can extend it to the businesses and the non-parents somehow, some way, maybe a part 2, and just compare data and look at it.
It may also be very important just to be able to share, because as families, you are isolated as well from each other. And as a group, those chat rooms may be real important to just connect and to realize that this is historic and we've never experienced this. So you can't just assume that everything is going to remain the same. We have to be, as you said, we have to be flexible. And what is just remarkable to me is that education did it in 48 hours. And that just gives me goosebumps. That it doesn't surprise me, because educators are really, they work with kids. They know what has to happen, but to have an organization turn around that fast is just pretty remarkable. All right, is there any other comments or questions, or for the good of the cause? Any other future items you want to chat about? I'm looking at the Brady Bunch here. All right.
I just want to say, please let all of our school district staff know that parents really are appreciative. I mean, they should know that we are very appreciative of all the work that they're doing.
I'm going to sound like a grandma, but a little email to your teacher and principal.
Oh yeah.
Maybe the superintendent once in a while would be, because as you know, people don't hear the good news. So, and we know that everyone is just working incredibly hard to keep our kids safe and to keep them educated. So thank you for.
Yeah, and the superintendent, but Dr. Pearson, if you have any concerns that you'd like to voice regarding school meals, I'll provide you an audience. If there's anything that I can help with. I know that we're working closely with the National Association of School Superintendents, but if there's anything that you want to voice, I'll be happy to send it directly to my CEO for sure.
Great, thank you for that.
Okay, so I think at this time, we're ready to adjourn this meeting. So the meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee Executive Team meeting of the school board, that is a mouthful, will end at 7:11 on April 23rd, 2020.